This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we continue our coverage of the Israeli offensive on Gaza, we turn to part two of our conversation with Henry Siegman, the former head of the American Jewish Congress and the Synagogue Council of America. What he says about the future of Israel and the ongoing assault on Gaza may surprise you. Siegman was born in 1930 in Frankfurt, Germany. His family fled Germany as the Nazis came to power. He eventually arrived in the United States in 1942. His father was a leader of European Zionism, pushing for the creation of a Jewish state. In New York, Henry Siegman studied and was ordained as an Orthodox rabbi by Yeshiva Torah Vodaas. He now serves as president of the U.S. Middle East Project. He recently wrote a piece for Politico headlined, "Israel Provoked This War. It's up to President Obama to stop it." Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh and I sat down with Henry Siegman on Tuesday. I asked him about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's claim that Israel is just responding to the thousands of rockets that Hamas and other groups are firing from Gaza.
And my response is that they wouldn't be firing those rockets if you weren't out, if you didn't have an occupation in place. And one of the reasons you say you do not have an occupation in place is because you really don't have a united partner, Palestinian partner, to make peace with. And when Palestinians seek to establish that kind of a government, which they just recently did, bringing Hamas into the governmental structure, Palestinian governmental structure, that is headed by Abbas, you seek to destroy that. You won't recognize it. And that's why I say there's several reasons for Israelis, for the Israeli action. A primary one is to prevent this new government from actually succeeding. It's an attempt to break up the new unity government set up by the Palestinians.
And why would they do that? Why would they want to do that?
They want to do that for the first time. For years, I have been suggesting and arguing that they want to do that because they are intent on preventing the development of a Palestinian state. To put it bluntly, they want all of it. They want all of Palestine. Now, this is something that Netanyahu said openly and without any reservations when he was not in government. He wrote about it, published a book about his opposition to a Palestinian state, that Israel couldn't allow that. The difference between the time that and he incidentally opposed not just Palestinian statehood, he opposed peace agreements with Egypt, he opposed peace agreements with Jordan. Any positive step towards a stabilization in a more peaceful region, Netanyahu has been on record as opposing. And when he came into office as prime minister, he understood that it is not a smart thing to say that Israel's policy is to maintain the occupation permanently. So the only difference between his positions in the past and the position now is that he pretends that he really would like to see a two-state solution, which, as you know, is the affirmation he made in his so-called Bar Ilan speech several years ago. And some naive people said, redemption is at hand. When to his own people he winked and made clear, and as I just read recently, I didn't know that it's on record that his father said, of course he didn't mean it. He will attach conditions that will make it impossible. But that was his tactic. His tactic was to say, we are all in favor of it, but if only we had a Palestinian partner. Now, in fact, they've had a Palestinian partner that's been willing and able. They set up institutions that the World Bank has said are more effective than most states that are members of the UN today. And that, of course, made no difference. And continued to say we do not have a partner because you have nearly 2 million Palestinians in Gaza who are not represented. So the unity government became a threat to that tactic of pretending to be in support of a Palestinian state.
In a response to the piece that you wrote for Politico that was headlined, "Israel Provoked This War," the Anti-Defamation League writes, quote, "Hamas has a charter which they live up to every day, calling for Israel's destruction. Hamas has used the last 2 years of relative quiet to build up an arsenal of rockets whose sole purpose is to attack Israel. Hamas has built a huge network of tunnels leading into Israel with the purpose of murdering large numbers of Israelis and seizing hostages." Henry Siegman, can you respond?
What I would point out to my former friend, Abe Foxman of the ADL, is that, too, is Israel's charter, or at least the policy of this government and of many previous governments, which is to prevent the emergence of a Palestinian state. And they have built up their army and their armaments to implement that policy. And the difference between Hamas and the State of Israel is that the State of Israel is actually doing it. They're actually implementing it. They're actually preventing a Palestinian state which doesn't exist. And millions of Palestinians live in this subservient position without rights and without security, without hope, and without a future. That's not the state of it. The State of Israel is a very successful state. And happily, Jews live there with a thriving economy and with an army whose main purpose is preventing that Palestinian state from coming into being. That's their mandate. But sadly and shockingly, they can stand by, even though international law says if you're occupying people from outside of your country, you have a responsibility to protect them. I mean, the responsibility to protect is the people you are occupying. The soldiers who are there, ostensibly to implement that mandate, will watch settler violence when it occurs, when they attack Palestinians in the occupied territories, and they will won't do a thing to prevent it. They won't intervene to protect the people they're supposed to protect, and they will tell you that's not our job. Our job is to protect the Jews.